Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at these suggestions passed to developers for August. It looks like it's back on track, and it's time to have a look at these suggestions. As always, we'll be going through them. If you want to have a look at them yourself, there's a link in the description for it. As always as well, thank you to Coke Spray and the team for putting this stuff together. It's always nice to see what they pass. The first suggestion is for Germany, and it's the Ju-88P3. This is a modified variant of the Ju-88A4. Basically, it carried two BK-37mm and also more armor than it, and the UMO-211P engines, which had a decent power of 1500 horsepower. Remember, the P series of Ju-88 is kind of like the anti-tank ones. Basically, the P1 had a PaK 40 BK-75, the B2 had two BK-37s, and the P3 obviously had the BK-37s, but with the upgraded engines, and also, of course, the more armor on the front of it. And the reason why they came around is because there was a ton of Russian tanks which were just gaining more and more armor, and Germany needed ways of dealing with this stuff. They wanted to be cost effective, therefore trying to use vehicles that they'd already created. They found that generally bombs weren't exactly as accurate as they wanted them to be, so they tried many different sets of vehicles to try and use cannons in this effective cast role. Remember the Ju-87Gs, which was a last-ditch attempt to try and keep the Ju-87 relevant, didn't really work too well. The Me-410s, which, did okay, but not great. And then, of course, the HS-129s, which had really underpowered engines, making it a little bit rough. The Ju-88P series was kind of the same idea, to try and take out tanks from the air, but also at the same time have a secondary role of taking out bombers, because they could be used in an anti-bomber role. The Ju-88 never really found its setting in the Second World War, if we're honest. It was kind of between a lot of roles many of the times, and that's why even this vehicle didn't really take off. It didn't really do too much for the same reason. The P-Series is one of those that I know a lot of people look forward to, but in real life, it didn't really do too much. For the Soviets, we have the Tupolev Tu-16, the Badger A. The Badger was originally conceived as a long-range, high-speed strategic bomber to bolster the Soviet Union's long-range bomber force's strength. With the Americans beginning to deploy pure jet-powered strategic bombers, such as the B-47 Stratojet, Soviet engineers were faced with a challenge: produce a design that could not only match but exceed American contemporaries. With limited experience in the field, they would have to work hard to deliver on this request, and the Tupolev Bureau had begun to foray into the field of jet bombers, and two key advancements allowed them to develop the Tu-16, which internal code was 88. Firstly, engineers had studied the swept-wing design of captured Me-262 fighters and Junkers bombers from Germany after their 1945 defeat. The swept wing was ideal for high-speed flight compared to a traditional straight-wing design. Compared to the Tu-16's direct competitor, the Ilyushin IL-46, the swept wing offered higher potential performance for the aircraft. Designing a heavy swept-wing aircraft was a first for the Bureau, with many challenges, but it had to be done. Extensive design studies were carried out to make sure the new design would be satisfactory. The second major advancement was in the field of turbojet engines. The enormous Mikulin AM-3 turbojet, offering 9,500 kgf thrust apiece, would be selected for the new bomber design. With two engines delivering a total of 19,000 kdf thrust, the Tu-16 project would be able to reach speeds of over 1,000 kilometers an hour. In order to reach this figure, the 88, a prototype version of the Tu-16, need a slimming down. Dropping over 5 tons in weight, the production Tu-16 was able to meet its design goals. It was faster, better defended, carried more load, and had a longer range than its competitor. For the Soviet Air Force, the choice was clear. The first prototype made its first flight on the 27th of April 1952. A revised prototype would fly on the 6th of April 1953, which demonstrated the improved speed gained from the weight reduction. After trials ranging from late 53 to early 54, the 88 was accepted for production as the Tupolev Tu-16. The Tu-16 would serve in a variety of roles in the Soviet Union and her allies for upwards of 40 years. It equipped both the Air Force and Navy as a long-range bomber, torpedo bomber, cruise missile carrier, reconnaissance aircraft, and more. In China, the Badger was licensed produced as the Zhan H6, which serves with the PLAAF to this day, and Tu-16s were also used by Egypt, Indonesia, and Iraq. Tu-16 saw action in the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia and later the Afghan War. By the 80s, the type was beginning to be phased out of service. While reliable, its age was painfully evident, and the Tu-22M2 backfire was a more attractive option towards the end of the Cold War. The dissolution of the Soviet Union, along with the following economic fallout, was enough to convince the Russian Federation to abandon the Badger for good. The vehicle itself had access to one AM-23 23mm fixed autocannon with 100 rounds, two AM-23 23mm in a dorsal turret, two 23mm in a ventral turret, and two 23mm in a tail turret, which is kind of nuts. It could carry a ton of different bombs, including up to a 9,000 kilogram bomb. It also had access to a bomb aiming radar, optical bomb sight, active jamming ECM, the Serena 3M radar warning receiver, and of course it had countermeasures on it as well. For Japan, we have the Mitsubishi XF2A prototype, the Fighter Zero. Basically, the FSX, later called the XF2A, origins can be traced back to the early 1980s, and the highly secretive Laboratory 3 division of Japan's Technical Research and Development Institute. There, studies were to be carried out to investigate the options for an indigenous design, combining long range with maneuverability to meet the particular requirements of the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. In 1987, the JASDF selected a variant of the F-16C as the Japanese FSX aircraft to replace the Mitsubishi F-1 aircraft, and in 1988, Mitsubishi was selected as prime contractor for the aircraft, which became known as the F-2. The program involved technology transfer from the US to Japan, and responsibility for cost sharing was split 60% by Japan and 40% by the US. 4 flying prototypes were developed, along with 2 static prototypes for static testing and also fatigue tests. Flight trials of the prototypes were successfully completed in 1997. The prototypes continue to exist this day, serving as test aircraft for new technologies and also weapons. The suggestion itself focuses on the prototypes which entered service in 2000, which include the weapons and also the systems on top of them, which is kind of nuts. Originally, the XF2A was to have had a pair of large canard surfaces underneath the air intake, much like those tested on the F-16 CCV and AFTI F-16. However, these were deleted from the design on the 11th of September 1991, reducing its weight and aerodynamic drag. The XF2A is quite similar in appearance to the F-16C and D, but features a new Japanese design wing of greater span and root chord. The wingspan is 36 feet 0 inches as compared to the 32 feet 9 3/8 inches of the standard F-16C. The new wing has 25% more area and makes extensive use of co-cured composite technology to cut down on the weight and to reduce the radar signature. The structures of the XF2 were based on the F-16, however. Structural design of the XF2 became an essentially new design because of the change of structural materials such as high-strength composite materials. The drastic weight reduction of the XF2 airframe was required to meet the maneuverability 9G to -3G requirements. Other FSX structural design changes include radar absorbent material, or RAM, applied to the aircraft's nose, wing leading edges, and engine inlets, the use of titanium in the tail, and also fuselage. The primary difference between the XF2A and the F-16 is in the use of the Japanese domestic technology for much of the avionics, including a new Mitsubishi Electric Active Phased Array Radar called the JAPG-1, the Yokogawa LCD multifunction display, a Shimadzu holographic display, and the Mitsubishi Electric Integrated Electronic Warfare System, plus an indigenous inertial reference system and also a mission computer. Japan was also forced to develop its own fly-by-wire software because the US government refusal to release the F-16's computer source codes. The XF-2A software is based on the MHI's Control Configured Vehicle Research Program flown in the early 1980s using a modified Mitsubishi T2 trainer. So the vehicle itself is pretty good, and also pretty, I suppose you would class it as pretty extensive for what it could get access to. It's a Mach 2 capable aircraft. It has a General Electric engine with an afterburner. It would have access to a 20mm M61 cannon, the Mitsubishi AAM-3, AIM-9L Sidewinder, the AIM-7F or M Sparrow, and the ASM-1, and also ASM-2. China gets a surprising addition with the Mirage 2000 5EI. The Mirage's story in Taiwan started in 1989 when France agreed to sell Mirage 2000 5 fighters to Taiwan after a visit from then Republic of China Chief of Staff Hao Bai-kun. During this time, the Republic of China Air Force was on a shopping spree for jet fighters after being snubbed for a decade by Western military powers cozying up to China to combat the Soviet Union. However, after an arms embargo was placed on China as a result of the Tiananmen Square massacre and later the collapse of the Soviet Union, the ROCAF was able to procure more advanced fighters such as the Mirage and F-16 to replace its aging fleet of F-104s and also F-5s. In 1992, the procurement of Mirage 2000 fighters was made public, and a contract was signed to sell Taiwan 48 Mirage 2000s 5EIs and 12 Mirage 2000 5DI trainers, along with 480 short-range Magics and 960 medium-range MICA-EM missiles, making Taiwan one of the largest foreign operators of the Mirage 2000. The Mirage's main purpose in the ROCAF is high-altitude air-to-air combat and also interception. In 1993, Taiwanese pilots and mechanics were sent to France to train and learn about the Mirage 2000. The Taiwanese and French personnel would primarily communicate in English, and training went fairly smoothly, save for a few instances of misunderstanding due to heavy accents when speaking English. Tragedy struck in Chinese New Year's 1996, when 499th Squadron's Captain Guy Guanyu received a call stating that two of the pilots' family members, their wives and one of their kids, had died in a car accident. Training was nearly complete, and finding a temporary replacement for them would be too disruptive. The two pilots decided they would go back to Taiwan for a short time to send off the ashes of their loved ones, and immediately return to France. Continue with the training for all pilots was completed on the 1st of April 1997. A couple of the pilots, Major Guan Rongyang and Major Lin Huan, underwent a special aerobatics training course for the Mirage and stayed behind for an extra month in France. However, they had less than the required 2,000 flight hours of the Mirage, so the instructors, Captain Bien Son and Captain Panso, were a bit wary and only taught them simple maneuvers at first. After seeing how quickly the pilots learned, the instructors continued to teach the pilots for about 10 sorties before they returned to Taiwan. Feeling more could be learned, the ROCAF hired Captain Biadzimon to finish the pilots' training in Taiwan for another month. In 1997, the first Mirages arrived in Taiwan and were sent to the Hsinchu Air Base, making them the first French fighter aircraft delivered to the ROCAF since the Duotine 510C. After final delivery in 1998, the Mirage 2005 fighters officially became part of the ROCAF as the part of the 41, 42, and 48 squadrons of the 11th Air Group 499 Tactical Fighter Wing. Nowadays, however, they serve under the 2nd Tactical Fighter Wing after reorganization, even though the Mirage 2005 EI is different from the US and Taiwanese aircraft ROCAF pilots are used to. It quickly became a popular aircraft amongst pilots, contributing to its continued service in the ROCAF. In 2022, 4 Mirages of the 2nd Tactical Wing won a simulated dogfight against 4 F-16Vs, posing as PLAAF fighters during a training exercise, shooting down all 4 of the F-16s and only losing 1 aircraft. In recent years, the Mirage 2005s have started to show their age. The aircraft is too expensive for Taiwan to upgrade in France, and furthermore, constant deployments to shadow PLAAF fighters entering the ADIZ and Taiwan's hot and humid climate are pushing the 25-plus-year-old Mirage fighters to their limits. In 2021, it was announced that a 5-year technical support agreement was signed between France and Taiwan to help maintain the Mirage fighters and its missiles. The Mika missiles are planned to be locally updated by the National Chung-Shan Institute of Technology, as was announced in 2016. The AMX MMX 595 is also here. Basically, the AMX project was started when the AMI, or the Italian Air Force, was looking for a light strike fighter to replace the old G91R and also bomber variants of the F-104S and ASA in 1977. At that time, Italy was also participating in the Panavia program for the Tornado with Germany and the UK, but the AMI also asked for another ground attack aircraft, one that would be cheaper and smaller compared to the Tornado and could be used alongside it. For this purpose, the AMX, or the Alenia Machi Experimental Project, was created, while Brazil was also looking for a new light combat aircraft to replace Aramachi's MB326 in 1981. After some discussions and agreements between the two countries, Embraer, a Brazilian aircraft company, joined the project. The first goal of the project was to build a total of 6 prototypes, and the initial plans called for a total of 187 aircraft for Italy and 100 for Brazil, a total of 132 aircraft for the Italian Air Force and 56 aircraft for the Brazilian Air Force. Unfortunately, the aircraft was lost after its 5th flight, and the pilot, Manrio Quarantelli, died after some time from wounds sustained in the high-speed impact. After this problem, the manufacturer of the engine, the British Rolls-Royce, was forced to rebuild the compressor that was the cause of the previous incident. The project continued until 2005 with the new upgrade ACOL, the second prototype of the B variant designated with the serial number MMX 595, preceded by the MMX 594, and followed by the MMX 596 and also 597, and then the Brazilians YA-14200 and YA-14201. It flew for the first time in the 19th of November 1984, and with all of its prototypes was the basis for testing all the functions and the weapons of the AMX-A, the first version. After its history and development, then you have its cool characteristics. You've got the Rolls-Royce RB168-807 Spey turbofan engine with a total thrust of 5,000 kilo, which gave the aircraft a top speed of 1,086 kilometers an hour. It also had access to some countermeasures as well, and could get some AMI-L sidewinders, and of course Mark 82, and MK82, and also 83 unguided bombs, plus the Sky Shark and random unguided rockets. For France, you have the Arsenal VG-39. Basically, in 1936, the Spanish Civil War unveiled many modern aircrafts and also weapons. The French Air Force, realizing it couldn't keep up anymore with the new fighters used by Germany, decided to launch a new program aimed at modernizing its own air fleet. The Arsenal VG-30 series stems from that necessity and was created by 2 engineers, Marius Vernisset and Jean Gaultier, hence the acronym VG. The idea behind the Arsenal VG-30 was that it would be built using mostly wood and easy to manufacture parts, so that any woodworker or craftsman would be able to produce the aircraft. As such, if France's major industrial regions were invaded and occupied by Germany, like it was the case in the First World War, France would still be able to mass-produce aircraft pretty easily. The VG-30 had numerous prototypes, or projects. The mass-produced version was the Arsenal VG-33 that we actually already have in-game. Then, the VG-39 was the ultimate variant of the VG-30 series, fully built and tested. It was quite different from the previous versions. While the wings kept their overall shape, the internal structure was modified to fit 6 machine guns instead of 4, and the nose lengthened to house the 1200 horsepower Hispano-Suiza HS-12Z engine. It was built late in 1939 and first flew on the 3rd of May 1940. The war and catastrophic turn of the Battle of France forced the Arsenal company to ship the aircraft in southern France to save it. Its production version, the VG-39 bis, was supposed to house a 1600 horsepower HS-12Z-17, but it was never built, as the armistice condemned the plane and also its development. So the standard one obviously had the Hispano-Suiza, but it also had 6 7.5mm Mach 3439 MGs and also one 20mm HS404. And then we have a Canadian aircraft, the CF-100 Mark IV-B, the Canuck. With the end of the Second World War and the dawn of the jet age, Canada found itself in need of a jet aircraft capable of defending its skies from coast to coast and as far north into the Arctic as possible. It was believed that in any case of war, the Soviet Union could fly bombers over the Arctic to attack North America, and in response to this, the Royal Canadian Air Force sets out a requirement for a fast, all-weather, long-range jet interceptor. Work at Avro began in 1946 and went on for 4 years, and on the 19th of January 1950, the CF-100 had its maiden flight, and entered service with the RCAF by April of 1953. The aircraft went on to serve with NORAD and NATO squadrons until the early 1960s as interceptors, but remained in service as training, reconnaissance, and also in the electronic warfare role until 1981. With NORAD, the aircrafts operated from Canadian airfields across the country with the defense of North America in mind. With NATO, the Canucks operated with the RCAF from airfields in France and Germany, and also served with the Belgian Air Force. There are many versions of the Canuck, but this suggestion specifically is looking at the CF-100 Mark IV-B. The reason for this being the flight performance, strengthened wings, high production numbers, as well as, of course, armament options. The 137 CF-100 Mark IV-As and also 141 Mark IV-B aircrafts were produced out of a grand total of 692 Canucks. The information that we're going to look through is mainly for the Mark IVs itself. The basic things to look at is they had some pretty cool setups when it comes to its overall avionics and also load weights. It was able to bring a lot of different things. So avionics wise, it had an AN/APX-25, MG2 fire control system, AN/APG-40 radar, an AN/ARN-6 radio, AN/AIC-10, and then also the AN/ARC-552. Armaments, it had a ventral pack carrying 8 M3 Browning 50 cals with 200 rounds per gun. It could also carry wingtip rockets to use against aircraft, which is quite fun. Also 4 1,000-pound bombs, one under each pylon, and also could carry 2 streamlined chaff dispensers in its outer wing bomb racks if it wanted to as well. The vehicle itself would be really nice to see. Hopefully at some point we could see it in the game, along with other Canadian aircraft as it moves around. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R., and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.